For years, humanity had scanned the stars, listening in silence, waiting for a voice that wasn't their own. Then, one ordinary night at the Deep Space Array in Western Australia, something extraordinary happened. A signal, repeating, structured, unmistakably artificial, appeared from the direction of the Zeta Eridani system. It was clear, not a random burst of radiation or a misunderstanding of nature. Earth had finally heard from something, or someone. News spread like fire. Theories exploded online, and people from all countries watched the skies with a mix of wonder and fear. In a rare act of unity, the United Nations responded immediately. A mission was launched. The Odyssey, Earth's most advanced exploration ship, would make contact. Leading the mission were Dr. Maya Chen, a brilliant cultural linguist and historian known for decoding ancient Earth languages, and General Marcus Steele, a retired but sharp military strategist, brought in just in case diplomacy needed a backbone. The crew was a mix of scientists, engineers, diplomats, and peacekeepers handpicked for calm heads and strong minds. After months of preparation and faster-than-light travel, the Odyssey approached the coordinates the signal had come from. Excitement pulsed through the crew as the stars shifted outside the ship's windows. But when they arrived, the mood shifted from awe to confusion, then to laughter. Before them hovered a colossal alien ship, unlike anything in Earth's imagination, towering like a floating cathedral in space. Covered in glowing blue runes, its hull carved with symbols that pulsed like a heartbeat. From external speakers, deep orchestral music played as if announcing the arrival of a galactic emperor. Some of the Odyssey's crew stared, trying to take it seriously, but others couldn't help but chuckle. "It looks like a space opera fever dream," one engineer muttered. Someone else joked, "Is this an alien ship or a sci-fi movie premiere?" Even General Steele raised an eyebrow. They're there showing off, or overcompensating. At first, the crew assumed it was a prank call, some ceremonial greeting. But then, a message came through, loud and clear, in perfect English. The alien ship, identifying itself as part of the Imperium of Zalari, demanded Earth's immediate surrender. Surrender. To a species that hadn't even introduced themselves properly. Dr. Chen exchanged glances with Steele. This wasn't how first contact was supposed to go. Alien speaker introduced himself as Lord Quirix, High Voice of the Galactic Imperium, and delivered his demand with all the dramatic weight of an ancient king. He spoke of Earth being discovered outside the galactic order, of unregistered life spreading unchecked, and how the Imperium was offering gracious annexation in return for peaceful obedience. On the Odyssey's bridge, the silence was thick for a moment. Then someone snorted. A second later, laughter broke out, not cruel, just stunned. They weren't mocking the aliens out of disrespect. It was just too bizarre. After all the decades of waiting for intelligent life, here it was, demanding surrender as if humans were villagers in a forgotten empire. Dr. Chen quickly composed herself, signaling for silence. She replied calmly, thanking the Zalari for their contact and asking for peaceful discussion. But Lord Quirix seemed irritated, insisting that the Imperium did not negotiate with primitives. Steele stepped in then, his voice calm but firm, saying Earth was not interested in being part of any empire, no matter how ancient or well-dressed. On the alien screen, Lord Quirix's insect-like face twitched in what might have been disbelief or insult. As the message ended, the mood on the Odyssey shifted again. The laughter faded, replaced by a strange tension. This was no joke. These aliens were real, and they were serious. Yet they had expected humanity to be awed, afraid, even grateful for being noticed. Instead, they were met with jokes and confusion. Dr. Chen sat quietly, thinking hard. These beings came with pride, with power, and with assumptions. They thought humans would kneel. But Earth had a long history of standing back up. General Steele leaned against the console, arms crossed, eyes locked on the strange alien cathedral ship. "Ahead, well," he said dryly. "First contact didn't go quite how they planned." The stars outside shimmered quietly, and for the first time in human history, Earth was no longer alone in the universe. But instead of fear, a strange feeling settled over the crew readiness. Humanity had waited a long time for this moment, and they weren't going to bow to anyone. Lord Querec stood tall on the glowing screen inside the Odyssey's main bridge. His insectoid form towering and regal, wings folded like a cape, his voice deep and sharp as a blade dragged across stone. Around him, strange banners fluttered in artificial wind. Behind him stood silent armored guards who didn't seem to breathe. This was not just an emissary. This was a symbol of the Zellery Empire's pride and power. Queerex had spoken to hundreds of species across the galaxy. Some had fallen to their knees the moment he spoke. Others had tried to resist for a time, but eventually bowed under the weight of fear. But never not once had a species laughed at him. And yet, here were the humans, laughing. The memory of their reaction during the first transmission played. Again, in his mind disbelief, grins, and those strange earth sounds called jokes. Now, as he stood before them again, he spoke of the Empire's history of thousands of worlds brought into the Zelari Order, of fleets that blackened skies, of rebellions crushed before they could rise. He spoke of a future for Earth under their guidance where chaos would end and order would reign. It was a speech carefully crafted to impress and intimidate. But instead of fear, Queerex received another round of uncomfortable silence, followed by a slow clap from General Marcus. "Steel." "Very dramatic," Steele said, leaning back in his chair. "You rehearsed that?" Dr. Maya Chen glanced sideways at him, clearly trying to remain diplomatic, but even she had to hide a smile. Steele, calm and collected, continued in his usual deadpan tone. "You're a few centuries late. Lord Quirkier, whatever your name was. We've already been through a few world wars, 5 near-apocalypses, climate disasters, and something called pineapple on pizza. We're still standing." Queerex paused, clearly thrown off. What is a pineapple? Dr. Chen stepped in quickly before Steele could offer a sarcastic explanation. Her tone was gentle, careful, the voice of a historian and a bridge builder. "Lord Querex, we understand your position. But Earth has a long, painful history with empires. We've had many. Most of them didn't end well. Our species grew stronger because we learned to question anyone who claims the right to rule us." She spoke of Earth's pasts of kings and revolutions, of broken chains and rising voices, of how resistance had shaped human culture. "We've learned to stand, not kneel," she added quietly. Rex narrowed his eyes, or at least, what passed for eyes among his species. Something had shifted in the room. The confidence he wore like armor began to feel heavier, more uncertain. These humans were not behaving as expected. They should have been afraid or at least overwhelmed. Instead, they treated his threats like stage performances. He looked at their faces so different, so expressive, and realized something that made him uneasy. They weren't being foolish. They were testing him. The humans weren't simply mocking the Empire. They were measuring it. Steele, noticing the silence, leaned forward again. "You expect us to kneel because you're old? Because you've conquered others? But here's the thing about humans: we've spent our whole history figuring out how not to be conquered. You bring ships? We've seen worse. You threaten war? We've lived through our own kind of darkness. We don't want to fight, but if you start one, I promise you'll regret it before it even begins." Queerex felt something unfamiliar rising in his chest in certainty. Were these humans mad? Or were they just bold in a way that other species had never dared to be? Zellery had studied many civilizations before contact, but humanity, they were new, unwritten. Their archives were filled with contradictions or in war, kindness and rebellion, logic and humor. And this humor, this strange weapon of theirs, it stripped away fear. He tried to analyze it like a tool, but it slipped through every calculation, could not decide if they were simple-minded or dangerously brilliant. He looked again at Dr. Chen, whose steady gaze held more wisdom than her young face suggested. Then at General Steele, who radiated the calm confidence of someone who had seen too much and survived it all. These humans were not just rejecting fear, they were inviting the Empire to look at itself. Queerex ended the transmission without another word, retreating into the shadows of his ship's inner chamber. Behind him, His aides whispered questions, unsure why the humans had not submitted. In silence, he replayed the moment Steele had smiled, and Chen had spoken of broken chains. And he wondered for the first time in centuries if the Empire had made a mistake in waking this unpredictable, stubborn, laughing world. Back on the Odyssey, the crew returned to their duties with a mix of amusement and tension. They had stood their ground, but everyone knew this was just the beginning. Dr. Chen looked out the viewing window at the alien cathedral ship, its glowing runes pulsing in quiet defiance. They came expecting worship, she whispered. Instead, they found a mirror. Steele gave a short nod, arms folded. Let's see if they're brave enough to look into it. When Lord Quirex returned to the humans, he did not come with another demand, but with a proposition. The ancient Zellery rite, known as the Trial of Species, was an old tradition from the Empire's early conquest. 3 challenges meant to test whether a newly discovered race was worthy of respect or should be brought under control. Most species who took the trial either failed or declined, knowing the cost of losing could mean their freedom. But to Quirex's quiet astonishment, the humans accepted without hesitation. No stalling, no fear, just a short, confident let's do it from General Steele. The first trial was a test of logic and intelligence, conducted by an ancient Zellery AI that had existed for over 10,000 years. The challenge was a riddle, a multi-layered complex problem built on advanced quantum reasoning, language puzzles, and symbolic thought. Many species had tried and failed, even those with neural enhancements. The AI warned them that no life form had ever solved it completely. Then came Dani Rojas, a young Earth mathematician with a love for weird logic, bad puns, and internet humor. She sat calmly in the glowing data chamber, the riddle displayed in a spiral of holographic layers. For 15 minutes, she said nothing, just chewed gum, tapped her fingers, and thought. Then, slowly, she smiled. She stood up, requested a projector, and gave a short, strange slideshow. It included a chalkboard diagram, a few logical steps, and then memes. One showed a dog in a lab coat with the caption, "I have no idea what I'm doing." Another was a joke about Schrodinger's cat arguing with a toaster. The Zellery AI paused, recalculated, paused again. Then a series of bright lights blinked across the room as the AI declared for the first time in its memory that the solution was not only correct, but elegant. Quirex's advisors exchanged uneasy glances. The humans had passed the logic trial with humor, of all things. The second trial was combat a physical test. An elite Zellery warrior named Craxelon, trained in 1,000 forms of martial arts. Across 100 planets floated into the zero-gravity arena with the quiet focus of a born fighter. General Steele, older and slower than his opponent, entered the opposite side without armor or weapons, just a flight suit and a single tool, a small wrench. The arena was a sphere of floating platforms, low gravity, and constantly shifting. Obstacles. The match began fast. Craxelon moved like lightning, flipping and striking with precision. Steele dodged, not by speed, but by understanding the space itself. Used a handhold to spin behind cover, let his momentum carry him between attacks, and used the wrench not to strike, but to redirect force. In one sudden moment, he caught Craxelon's arm, pushed off a platform, and flipped the warrior into a spinning wall. The match ended not with a knockout, but with Craxelon trapped and stunned. Suspended upside down, tangled in his own momentum. Steele floated nearby, calm, and said, "You fight well, but physics always wins." The Zellery spectators were silent. Quirex watched with an unreadable expression. Twice now, humans had proven themselves first with mind, now with movement. But it was the third trial that truly mattered. The cultural test. It was meant to judge the soul of a species, not just their intelligence or strength, but what they cherished. Dr. Maya Chen took the lead. In a grand presentation hall aboard the Odyssey, she introduced the Zellery judges to Earth's art, music, and stories. First, she played Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. The Zellery had never heard music that stirred emotion without language. As the final chorus soared, Some of them sat in still silence, unsure how to process what they were feeling. Came paintings from Da Vinci to Van Gogh, from tribal cave art to abstract modern pieces. Then came poetry, dance, and literature. Dr. Chen spoke of loss, love, hope, and rebellion. And then at the end, she showed them something different. Clips from Earth's comedy. Monty Python's flying absurdities, Charlie Chaplin's silent genius, and a modern animation of a penguin slipping on ice. The room was quiet. The Zelari Council looked at each other, confused. "What is the purpose of this?" one of them finally asked. Dr. Chen smiled. "To make you laugh, or at least try to. Humor is how we survive pain. It's how we stay human." There was no immediate applause, no declarations, but the silence was different this time. Not cold, but thoughtful. The trials had ended, and the humans had passed each one. But more than that, they had surprised the Empire. Not by brute power, but by creativity, wit, and the refusal to be anything less than themselves. As the humans left the hall, Steele muttered to Chen, "Well, if we lose now, at least we went down playing Beethoven and memes." Chen gave him a look. "We're not going down. They came to test us. But now they're the ones with questions." Somewhere deep in the Empire's ship, Lord Quirex sat in silence, watching the recordings again. The humans were not what he expected. They were something new. Something that could not be conquered by fear or measured by tradition. And for the first time in a long while, he wasn't sure if the Imperium was ready for them. Far away from Earth, inside the heart of the Grand Zalari warship, a secret meeting was taking place deep within the council chamber of the Imperium. The walls shimmered with shifting patterns of starlight as if the galaxy itself was listening.
"Our Lord."
Quirex stood before the council of elder-mind sentient beings who had ruled for centuries with precision and control. He had once believed in the power of tradition, in the structure of conquest, in the safety of protocol. But now he spoke with urgency and unease.
Us!
He told them Earth was not what they thought. The humans were strange, yes loud, emotional, full of humor, and disrespectful of power, but they were also sharp, resilient, and terrifyingly unpredictable. He spoke of their refusal to kneel, their ability to solve impossible problems, their skill in battle, and their rich, chaotic culture that mixed beauty with absurdity. "They do not fear us," Quirex warned. "And worse, they make us unsure of ourselves," the council murmured, unsure whether to take this seriously or dismiss it as another anomaly. Meanwhile, back aboard the Odyssey, the humans were quietly learning just how far the Empire's reach extended. As part of cultural exchange, Dr. Maya Chen and her team were granted limited access to other alien envoys under Zalari control. These were not meetings with equal partners, but with species who had been welcomed into the Empire generations ago. Some still remembered their independence. Others had grown used to obedience. But under the surface, Dr. Chen noticed something. Powerful hope. In whispers, in cautious questions, in the way some of them leaned in when she spoke of Earth's freedom, she realized they were listening. Not just to her words, but to the message behind them, that a species had stood before. The Empire, and said no and, had not yet been broken. Quietly, she and her team built connections, shared small truths, and listened. They didn't make promises. But the idea of Earth's defiance began to spread. Back on the Zelari flagship, pressure was rising. Some in the council believed humanity should be accepted as equals, rare as that offer was. Others saw Earth as too dangerous and unpredictable force that could inspire rebellion. At last, one voice declared that Earth must submit or be forcibly brought into the fold. The message was sent. It arrived on the Odyssey in a sealed transmission, filled with formal words and polished threats. Surrender peacefully or face consequences beyond imagination. The crew read it in silence. The room was heavy with tension. But General Marcus Steele remained calm, as always. He stood slowly, walked to the main console, and requested a live reply. When Lord Quirex appeared on screen once again, expecting hesitation or negotiation, he found the general's expression unchanged, calm, steady and firm. Steel didn't raise his voice. He didn't make threats. He simply began to speak. "We came in peace," he said. "That part hasn't changed. We reached out because we hoped the galaxy was full of friends. We still do. But don't mistake peace for weakness." Then, without fanfare, he recited parts of Earth's history. Wars that spanned continents, struggles that lasted for centuries, empires that rose and fell. He spoke of nations that had burned, of cities that had stood again, of people who had never given up, even when all hope seemed lost. "We are messy," he admitted. "We argue, we stumble, we fall, but we always get back up. That's who we are. You see us laughing and think it means we don't take you seriously? But the truth is, laughter is what keeps us sane after surviving everything we've survived." He paused then, letting his words settle in the quiet air between them. "You force us to fight, we will. And if we fight, we don't stop. Not until it's over. You've seen our minds. You've seen our strength. But what you haven't seen yet is our resolve. We don't give up. Ever." His final words were simple, but carried the weight of 1,000 years of Earth scars and victories. "We came in peace, but we're very good at war." Quirix said nothing. The screen went dark. On the Odyssey, there was no celebration. No cheering, only silence. They had drawn the line. Whatever came next would define humanity's place in the stars. Back on the Zellery ship, Lord Quirix stood in his private chamber, the council silent behind closed doors. He looked out into space, not with the gaze of a conqueror, but of someone facing the unknown. The humans were not the strongest species he had met, not the most advanced, but they were, perhaps, the most dangerous, not because of their weapons, but because of their spirit. They were a species that turned chaos into creation, pain into poetry, and fear into laughter. And now, the Empire had to decide. Would they fight a people who had already survived their own worst nightmares? Or accept that, perhaps for the first time in centuries, the Imperium had found its match? The Zelari had ruled the stars for so long that they had forgotten what uncertainty felt like. They had conquered worlds, enforced silence, and rewritten histories to fit their truth. But now, after facing humanity, a loud, unpredictable, stubborn race that laughed in the face of power, they found themselves hesitating for the first time in generations. War was still an option, yes, but it was no longer a guaranteed victory. The trial of species had proven that humans were not just capable, they were dangerous in ways the Zelari couldn't calculate. Their logic was flexible, their strength was creative, and their spirit could not be bent. Lord Quirix, who had once called for Earth's surrender, now stood before the council with a different proposal. He didn't call it defeat. He called it balance. The offer was this: a neutral alliance. Earth would not be conquered, but neither would it stand fully apart. Instead, it would be invited to join the Galactic Council, not as a subject world, but as the first equal partner from beyond the Empire's traditional reach. It was an idea that rattled the old order, but it was accepted, quietly, carefully, because even the proudest rulers knew that starting a war with a species that made jokes before battles and listened to classical music while planning strategy might end badly. The news traveled fast. Across distant star systems, species that had lived for centuries under the weight of the Empire heard whispers of what Earth had done. A small world, unconnected to the great power structure, had stood its ground, and one not with violence, but with courage, cleverness, and humor. Rebellions didn't explode overnight, but small fires were lit. In the outer systems, secret messages began passing from ship to ship. Stories of Earth, clips from old Earth comedies, images of humans shaking hands instead of bowing. Some resistance leaders reached out to human diplomats, not for weapons, but for guidance, for morale, for the strange power humans carried in their refusal to break. And the humans responded in their own way, sharing advice, yes, but also laughter, somewhere in a hidden station on a quiet moon. A rebellion fighter looked at a meme sent from Earth that simply read, "Don't panic, we have snacks." It wasn't just funny, it was a signal, reminder that hope could be lighthearted. Back on Earth, the Odyssey returned to a planet that had changed forever. The people cheered. Celebrations filled the skies with light, and for once, humanity had something to be proud of on a galactic scale. News channels showed images of Dr. Maya Chen standing beside representatives from alien species, her calm and curious smile becoming a symbol of unity. Her book, Diplomacy and Dad Jokes, How We Beat an Empire, became a bestseller in a week. In it, she explained the mission from start to finish, how understanding culture, staying grounded, and never losing the ability to laugh had turned an impossible confrontation into a new beginning.
Oh.
Meanwhile, General Marcus Steele, the calm warrior who had said less than most, but spoken volumes when it counted, returned to his quiet cabin in the mountains. When reporters visited him for interviews, he gave short answers, shrugged a lot, and only said, "They just needed a sense of humor, that's all." Funny thing is, they almost had one. Then he turned off the cameras and went back to chopping firewood. But even in retirement, he kept a close eye on the stars. He knew that the story wasn't over. Peace was fragile, and alliances shifted like solar winds. But Earth had earned its place, not by pretending to be something it wasn't, but by showing the galaxy exactly who it was: human, flawed, brilliant, fearless, and somewhere in the depths of space. Aboard a vast and silent Zolari cruiser drifting through the void, Lord Querec stood alone at a viewing port, watching a distant star blink softly. His people still debated whether they had lost or negotiated, whether Earth was a threat or a lesson, but he knew the truth. The humans had not beaten the Empire with war, they had outhought it, outsmarted it, and perhaps most disturbingly, outlawed it. Quirex didn't know whether to fear them or admire them. Perhaps both. "It's the galaxy!" would never be the same. And in the long quiet after the trial of species, across empires and rebel camps, research stations and marketplaces, one phrase began to echo, often spoken with a grin and a raised brow. Careful with those humans. They came in peace. But they stayed because they made everyone laugh.